Okay, hello everybody. Afternoon, everybody, and thanks for joining us. My name is Richard Yarwood. I'm a professor of human geography at University of Plymouth. And what I'm going to do is be talking to you about one of your A-level themes, about changing places, and in particular about rebranding urban and rural areas. So really pleased you can join me today. First of all, of course, I hope you're all well and you're coping with lockdown all right. And thanks for making the time to come and join us. What I'm going to do is probably talk for, I don't know, about 45 minutes or so. We are hopefully recording it, so that should be available afterwards if you'd like to watch it again, or if you missed anything and like to see it again, it should be available for you as a recording. We've also got the chat function. It's really difficult talking to you all on Zoom, and I think if we opened up the microphones or the videos, we'd just get a whole sort of a kerfuffle of noise. So what you can do is post a question on the sort of chat function, and what we'll do is sort of take a list of those, and I'll try and answer some of them at the end if I can, and get back to you that way. So in fact, I think Shona's just put a message up, so if you'd like to sort of message her on the chat function, we can compile those at the end and do it. Hopefully you can you all hear me okay? Yeah, hopefully you can hear me. Yeah, that's what I'll do. So I'll talk for about 40 minutes or 45 minutes or so, and then we'll have a bit of a Q&A at the end. So what I'm going to do is hopefully share my screen with you, which probably means I'll disappear into the top right hand corner, but hopefully you can see the first slide up there now. Again, hopefully, if Shona, can you just sort of confirm you can see that, or somebody? Just hopefully it's all, yeah, it's all clear. Brilliant. Okay, so hopefully you should see that the first slide and my sort of picture probably in the top right hand corner. So as I said, just again, thanks very much for coming to visit us virtually today and to listen to the talk. We hope you find it of use. What I've tried to do is fit it to your A-level themes, so it should address some of the issues you're looking at in the Changing Places module. As I say, I'm from the University of Plymouth, and you might be thinking of joining us this September, or you might be thinking of applying next year. If you'd like to do that, we have sort of got a virtual open day on our website at www.plymouth.ac.uk, where you can listen to talks about the admissions tutor, browse some of the courses that we've got in geography and earth sciences and environmental sciences as well. Just a quick plug for the place. Obviously, we do offer a whole range of courses you can follow. They're excellent in terms of the sort of teaching and research, fully accredited with the RGS. Normally we offer lots of fieldwork opportunities. Obviously, in the new world of COVID, we'll see how that pans out. And we have lots of applied and practical courses. So if you'd like to know more about that, I'm not going to overdo the branding and the plugging. Please do drop us a line, either to me or admissions or just on the website. Okay, back to the sort of talk and what I'm going to talk about today. So what I'm going to look at the course, I'm going to look at, in particular, the aspect of selling places and marketing places. And I'm going to look at the way in which urban and rural areas have had to rebrand themselves and remarket themselves as part of a sort of changing economy. So what I'm going to do is split the talk into sort of, four main parts. First of all, just give you a few thoughts as an introduction, then look at the reasons why places have had to rebrand before looking at some urban and then some rural examples. Of course, this is a geography talk, and geography is a fantastic subject to sort of study at university. It teaches you sort of real world skills. But obviously with sort of COVID at the moment, a lot of it almost feels like a sort of history talk, maybe looking at what was going on. But I will mention a little bit about sort of going forward into the future and maybe some of the post-COVID world that we'll be living in. So, just as an introduction, normally at this point, if I give this in a lecture, I sort of ask for suggestions from the audience. So if you're doing it as a group, perhaps, in your household, obviously socially distancing, perhaps you can have a chat to each other, or just have a think about, well, when we think about the city and the country, when we think about the things that dominate these places, what are the dominant industries in these places? How do they make their money? Where do their incomes come from? What kind of jobs do people do? And I sort of throw this open to the audience, a bit like one of those sort of QI questions, hoping everyone will sort of get the wrong thing. Because I guess the sort of stereotypes of urban rural economies are what you can see in these screens. And that we perhaps associate the city with manufacturing, with industry, with factories, and we associate the countryside very much with farming and agriculture, or the primary industries, things like forestry, things like fishing, mining, and so on. But predominantly, I guess we think of the countryside, we think of farming. And of course, this is very important to the countryside. Vast tracts of land are used for farming. And I think probably more than ever in the current situation, we are actually starting to appreciate where our food comes from, and in particular, who is picking it. However, it might sort of interest you to know that actually, if we look at some data for the economy of the country and the city, they actually look pretty similar. Now, these data are a little bit old, but I'll show you some more recent ones in a moment. But I just like the way they've sort of presented these figures. It shows the percentage of people working in each industry in rural areas on the left, or at least my left, and urban areas, which is defined as anything over 10,000 people. That's a sort of standard sort of government definition. We could argue about what urban and rural is, but we'll take those for granted at the moment. And if you look at those kind of sort of two little donut sort of diagrams, just at a first glance, they look remarkably similar. Now, obviously, the country one, you can see the yellow band, 7.5% of people working in agriculture, compared to just 0.3 in urban areas. We'd expect that. So yes, of course, more people work in agriculture in the country, in the city. But if you look at them as a percentage of everybody, it's actually relatively small. It's only 7.5%. And by contrast, if we look at those diagrams, there's a sort of browny, sort of goldy shading to about the 7 o'clock position, 8 o'clock position in those diagrams, which actually is property and businesses. And you can see 16% of the country work in that, 20% in the city. What's also interesting is the light blue shading that's about 6 o'clock on the rural diagram and about 5 o'clock on the urban one. Quite surprisingly, 13.1% of people in 2009 in rural areas worked in manufacturing, compared to only 9.5% in the city. So in fact, manufacturing is a lot higher percentage-wise in the country and the city. Now, so those are old data. If you want some up-to-date data, this is a really useful publication. It's called the Statistical Digest of Rural England. It's published by DEFRA. It comes out every year. Look on their website. You can see the full Monty and download it for yourself. But those are the data that's sort of again taken for manufacturing. Sorry, taken for employment in the country and the city. And basically, the sort of pattern I'm sort of getting across to this is essentially they're pretty similar. Yes, there's a few sort of variations and so on, but they're pretty similar in both areas. And in fact, the sort of sector that really sort of dominates employment in both the country and the city is what we call the sort of service sector, the service sector. Okay, and again, just a few more sort of data from that, saying three sectors with the highest percentages in rural areas are education, retail and repair of motor vehicles, obviously linked to farming, and manufacturing. So manufacturing is quite high. But back to what I was saying, the sort of economic sector that dominates both the country and the city is what we call the service sector. There's various sort of definitions of service. Some call it the sort of quaternary sector, not the quaternary, anyway, that sector. One definition of it is that it's anything that can be sold in trade that can't be dropped on your foot. So perhaps financial services, legal services, educational services. And I've put a couple of photos up here that I quite like that sort of chart the ways in which the country and the city have changed. So the one on the left, the more urban setting, is actually taken from Birmingham, which is in fact my hometown, my home city. So hello, are you from Birmingham? Something like a local DJ there, but never mind. And what we can see on the right hand of that canal, right hand side of the canal, it used to be called the International Convention Centre. I believe it's called the Barclaycard Arena now, or it was a couple of years ago when I saw Iron Maiden there. But anyway, what we can see from that photo is this shift from Birmingham from an industrial city. You can see on the left some old warehouses. You can see the canal, which will be from Birmingham. You'll know Birmingham's got more canals than Venice. But canals used to be the sort of motorways of the 19th century, taking goods from manufacturing heartlands like Birmingham across the country and then out to sea internationally. And of course, as that's changed, so the warehouse on the left is clearly sort of derelict. The convention centre on the right is a place where you can go and see concerts, you can go and meet, you can go and have all kinds of entertainment experiences. There are TV programmes are filmed there as well. So that to me very much mirrors that shift from an industrial city where most jobs are in manufacturing, that's declined in Birmingham, to a service city, a city where jobs are mainly based on the service sector, entertainments, conferences, meetings, universities. On the right, we can see perhaps a similar picture in the countryside. And that is, of course, a picture of a barn conversion. On the left, with the sort of corrugated iron, you can see the building that used to be used probably as a barn by a farmer. And on the right, if you like, the sort of shiny new house that's been converted from that barn into something that people will want to buy, okay, and live in. And you're not just buying a house, you're kind of buying into a rural lifestyle. So if you look at programs like Location and Escape to the Country, a whole raft of programs like that on the television, you'll see you're not just buying mortars and spoonerising, not just buying mortars and bricks, but you're also buying a rural experience, a rural lifestyle. So in both of these places, we've seen a shift from an economy based on industry in the city towards services, and same in the country, one that's maybe dominated by farming to one that's now dominated by the service sector. And in both places, we've seen a shift from production, that's making things, be it in a factory or growing things in a field, to an economy based on consumption, which is about buying and selling things. You know, we live in a consumer society. Currently, of course, all the talk at the moment is about the hit that coronavirus has had on the economy. You know, the sectors that are really suffering are things like retail, things like cafes, things like restaurants. Those kind of sectors are the ones really suffering because we can't buy anything. And what we hope for, what we all hope for when we come out of this, is that consumer confidence will grow and we'll start buying things again, whether that's a cake in a shop or a coffee or going to the pub or whatever. That's what's really driving our economy. And by another way of illustrating this is Bath on the right and Cheddar Gorge on the left. They're the location, in fact, of our sort of first year geography field trip. We take students up to these places straight away. We go for a residential field course and we look at Bath and we look at its countryside around it. And you can see from both of those places, on the right, you've obviously got the Abbey in Bath, you've got a busker, you've got the tap rooms there, the spa and everything. Bath makes most of its money from tourism. Ditto on the left, Cheddar Gorge as well. You know, with not much evidence the biggest sort of income, the biggest money making there is selling people visits to the caves or climbing up the rocks or what have you. Again, both places, consumption, selling things and buying things, the most important thing. Now, there's an argument that you've probably heard that globalization and global economic trends are leading to what are called clone towns, clone places. So again, on the right, actually looking at these, a lot of these are shut down now, haven't they? But if you could, you know, imagine your hometown, your home city, or the nearest place to you, if you were blindfolded and put there, and I took the blindfold off, you could be anywhere. It's probably got a Starbucks, you know, it's probably got Starbucks, it's probably got the McDonald's, it's got all the sort of big four sort of supermarkets in those places. And it'd be hard pressed maybe to locate where you are. I also think this is the same in the countryside. On the left, you can see some Frisian cows. Let's face it, I'll be Frisian standing in a field all day as well. Now, I'll get the same silence if I do it live. But anyway, especially in this nice weather. But Frisian cows, more seriously, are the most productive milkers. Okay, if you're a farmer and you want to generate the most milk, you may well keep Frisian cattle. And as a result of this, they're found all the way around the world. And so when I go to the country and I see these cows everywhere, again, I think that's an illustration of globalization and perhaps a sense that places are getting the same, they're looking the same. And so this is where rebranding comes in. It's crucially important as we're shifting to a post-industrial or a post-productive economy. And we want people to come and visit places, to spend money in places, to kickstart our economy. It's important to make places distinct from other ones. So why go to a holiday, I don't know, in Tenerife or Madagascar? Okay, just two pieces picked at random. We can't now, can we? Why go to Plymouth or why go to Portsmouth? What's the difference between them? Okay, if you're an industry, why would you go to these places? So it's really important to distinguish between these different places. And so what we get and what we've had increasingly over the years is cities, towns, the country, villages, universities, shopping centres, spending more and more money and investing more and more time on creating and marketing a distinct brand for their place. So obviously I'm from Plymouth, I work in Plymouth, I live there as well. I've put that up as an example. I'll talk about Plymouth's rebranding in a moment, but currently it's Britain's Ocean City. And there are many Plymouths around the world, but only one proper Plymouth. 50 across the world. In America, for example, I went to New Plymouth in New Zealand as well. And again, what Plymouth is trying to do is set itself apart from those other Plymouths, sort of hypothetically, but also set itself apart from other places in Britain and across the world as well, through a particular marketing campaign, which I'll look at in a moment. So for all these reasons, to attract trade, to attract visitors, to attract students, places have had to rebrand themselves to make themselves attractive and stand out in a global marketplace. And so, looking at this, what cities have had to do is invest themselves or invest in a particular branding. Now, an article by two academics, Medway and Wannabe, in 2014, argued that a good brand should have those, 7, I think, distinctive features. It should be simple, distinctive, memorable, meaningful, evocative, protectable, and also perhaps transferable, though those two are perhaps slightly sort of contradictory. And you can see perhaps from that little poster on the slide as well that some of those might seem very familiar. Certainly the I Love New York one's quite iconic. It appeared on T-shirts and all sorts of different things. It's been applied to other things as the copyrights run out. But these are all perhaps brands. They've got a logo. They've got a sign, images that connect you with that particular place. Now, just to see how successful these are, this is, as I say, this is a really sort of famous one. It's the I Love New York. It was designed in 1976 by Milton Glasser. New York at the time had a terrible image problem, particularly to do with crime. So it was putting people off visiting. The thought that you might get sort of mugged at night, or the underground was too dangerous to travel on at night as well, was putting off people, was putting off investment. And so this was part of a broader package. There were many other measures as well. There was a very sort of tight sort of enforcement of policing, something called broken windows policing, zero tolerance policing as well, that helped clean up, in inverted commas, the city rather controversially. But this branding also went along with it. New York wasn't a place to be feared. It wasn't a place to be loathed. It was a place to be loved. A simple logo, I Heart NY, obviously the NY standing for New York. Instantly recognizable. Hugely sort of successful, and again you can see other sort of copies of it in different places as well. Maybe your hometown's got a similar one, but it's a hugely iconic rebranding of New York, putting it on the map, as it were. Now again, what I normally do when I sort of give this live, so to speak, is try and get people to guess the place branding for each place. Now, I can't do this with you now, so at home, if you've got a bit of pen and paper or you just want to have a little guess of what they are, just see if you can think what city this is. I'll give you a clue. It's a British city. It's actually a city in Scotland, and you can see Mr. Happy there from the Mr. Men. And the name of that place is Smiles Better. In case you didn't know, Smiles is the longest word in the English language. Why is that? Well, there's a mile between the first and the last letters. Anyway, put you out of your misery. That was actually, in fact, for Glasgow. A very, very successful marketing campaign called Glasgow is Miles Better. Why was this? Well, perhaps Glasgow, and again, if you're from Glasgow, no doubt you'll hugely sort of disagree with this, but Glasgow perhaps had an image of being a town in decline, with a sort of fair set of sort of social problems linked to gang violence and hard drinking and so on. And so what they wanted to do was actually smash away some of those sort of stereotypes. So rather than making the place seem sort of aggressive or unfriendly, it emphasized the friendly nature, friendly sort of character of Glasgow. Glasgow smiles better, okay? And again, this logo has been refreshed, as you say, in sort of marketing pilots over the years, okay? And obviously linked to sort of Commonwealth Games and so on as well. Glasgow's miles better, slightly different figure. I don't think it's Mr. Happy, not sure what that is. But again, the same message. It's a friendly place to come to. Okay, here's a couple of other ones. Let's just see if you can guess the city. There's obviously huge irony at any place describing itself as open at the moment, as nowhere really is, are they? But anyway, the one on the left has used this word open, okay, and it shows various pictures of the city and has it branded everywhere. It's quite a clever one because it actually builds on the name of this particular city. Okay, the word open appears in the city's name. So see if you can guess what it is. I'll come back to in a moment. And then the other one on the right has got lots of M's, all coloured in lots of different colours and lots of different styles and lots of different designs. That M, see if you can guess what city that is. Or I'll talk about the first one. The first one, if you might have guessed, is actually Copenhagen in Denmark. Okay, it's open. And so again, it's obviously quite a clever play on the title of the word, but again, it suggests an openness. Come and visit. You know, we're open for business, we're open for tourism, we're open because we're friendly. That playing on the name over and over again. The city on the right begins with M, so see if you can pluck any city out of the air beginning with M. So you can guess what it is. It's actually Melbourne in Australia. And again, the purpose of this is really just to show the diversity, the vibrance of that city with a very sort of striking letter M. So every time you see that letter M, no matter what the style, you associate with Melbourne, perhaps. So again, the New York one I showed you, hugely successful, Glasgow one as well. Maybe these are slightly more obscure, who knows? A couple of others. The one on the left, the one that says can't wait, can't wait, can't wait for Christmas. Christmas app, name the city, We're So City. That sounds very teenager like We're So City. But no, so you can guess what place that is. If you're from that place and you happen to be listening from that particular place, you may well guess what it is. I'm also guessing that if you're not from that place, that seems fairly obscure. Again, I'll get back to that one at the moment and put you out in misery. The one on the right, again, what that does is, again, it's brightly coloured, it's bold, and what it does is use an iconography, which is icons, pictures, symbol that symbolise particular things, that really flag some of the key things that we associate with that place. So if you look carefully on the top line, there's horse races, there is sort of sailing, actually sort of junk. There are trams. There is a very, very famous ferry that operates in that city. There's cable cars, panda bears, and so on as well. Interesting, the words that go with that: free, enterprising, cosmopolitan, secure, safe, excellent, and so on. So even guess what it is if you can't already. Also, in fact, look at some of the buildings on the bottom right. They're also quite distinctive as well, if you know that place. Anyway, back to the first one, that rather odd, can't wait for Christmas. Any ideas what it might be? Give you a clue. I mentioned I'm from that particular place originally. It is in fact Birmingham. And particularly, it's actually associated with the Bullring Shopping Centre, which had a renovation a few years back. You can just about see, I don't know if you can see the arrow on my screen, you can just about see sort of an outline of the Bullring up there, and the Rotunda, again, another sort of famous building in Birmingham. So all very futuristic, or sort of almost a fantasy. Perhaps it's almost a fantasy when you sort of, go in a sort of magical place to shop. I don't know. But there we are. That's Birmingham's marketing one. On the right is actually Hong Kong. Again, if you know the place, if you've been there, it might seem obvious. If you don't, perhaps less so. But it's interesting, the wording. Obviously, Hong Kong is part of China, but it's emphasizing it is free, it's enterprising, it's connected to the world. Okay, it's a very sort of strong financial centre, and obviously safety as well. It's important. Of course, we've had the yellow umbrella sort of revolution and protest recently as well. A couple of others. Again, if you live there, you probably know them. If you don't, you probably don't. The one on the left, blank the original one off. Could be anywhere. It is in fact Shrewsbury. And again, you'll see that reproduced in all kinds of branding around the city. The one on the right, well, there's a bridge, there's a market, a castle, some plants of some sort, a rugby ball, and it looks like a bicycle wheel. It's not a bicycle wheel, it's in fact a wheel from a colliery. So it might place it somewhere, perhaps with a mining pass that also likes rugby in South Wales, and it is in fact, I think it's Newport. I might have got that wrong. Anyway, there we are. So Place branding, those are some examples of it, okay? Partly brands that are familiar to you, some of them work, some of them perhaps less so. But what does place branding try and do? Well, again, there's a little quote there from a paper by Kavaratits. And they say it's an effort to try and create emotional, mental, and psychological connections with a place. So if I showed you perhaps your hometown through any of those, you might have, I don't know, felt a twinge of pride, of loyalty, and flying the flag for that particular place. If you didn't, you maybe start to connect with it. But that said, it's not just pure marketing, it's actually creating these links with places that make you want to invest in it because, I don't know, you love the place or you like the place, you want to know more about it. And those are some of the ways that we go through doing it. Now, marketing campaigns tend to follow three sort of phases: an analytical phase where you try and look at what the problems are, what the issues are, what you want to turn around. So in the case of Glasgow, it was turning around perhaps an image of it being in decline and perhaps being aggressive. Also with New York as well, the same issue of very high crime putting people off as well. So you analyse what the problem is. You have a sort of strategic phase where you implement a new set of ideas and new branding. And then I think most importantly, you have what's called a participatory phase where people buy into that brand. We've probably all perhaps sort of think of examples where you might think marketing's a little bit naff, or you don't really like it, or they've changed the flavour of your favourite drink or whatever, you don't buy into it. A really important thing for this to work is for people to buy into that brand and for everything to be going on in that place to align to it. So let's have a look. Again, I'm going to use as an example my own hometown, or my current hometown. I've lived here for 20 years now, of Plymouth. Now, Plymouth has undergone various rebrandings, some more successful than others. So when I arrived in Plymouth, which was getting on for 20 years ago, excuse me, I'd be driving down the A38, which is the main road going into Plymouth, and I would see that splendid sign saying Plymouth, City of Discovery, with a kind of compass point as well. And I thought, oh, very geographical, splendid, coming to lecture in geography, but there we are, almost symbolic for me. But of course, the sort of logo that goes with it, obviously it's got welcome in different languages, but the logo that goes with it is Plymouth Spirit of Discovery. And obviously what that is alluding to are some of the great voyages that have gone from Plymouth. The Mayflower voyage that we are celebrating 400 years of this year. Francis Drake's circumnavigation of the world. Francis Drake being a local boy, a local Plymouth-based admiral. Okay, so what this does is kind of allude to that heritage. And again, in a lot of place marketing, a lot of branding, there is reference to heritage. What has made that place unique? What has somehow made it different from other places? What can be celebrated in a particular place? And of course, it's not just looking back, spirit of discovery. It's implying that Plymouth still has a spirit of discovery, one that you will discover for yourself, perhaps, when you come here. And it's saying it's still a go-ahead kind of city. And that was a sort of key branding that lasted until, I think, around 2010. Of course, you drive into the, no, actually it wasn't 2010, it was about 2003 or 4, I think. But anyway, you drive into Plymouth and you see the Spirit of Discovery, and some wag actually changed the sign to Plymouth Spirit of Disco. So more reminiscent of the 1970s than the 17th century and some of the voyages from that. But nevertheless, quite a nice little embellishment, and actually became something of a symbol when you drove into Plymouth. Okay, so Plymouth Spirit of Discovery, or Spirit of Disco, if you rather, was then replaced by another branding in 2010 that was called Positively Plymouth. Okay, and apparently it was £53,000 I read to come up with that brand, which actually seems quite cheap in today's money. Positively Plymouth. Well, why was Plymouth positive? And again, the idea with that was really to, I suppose, shake off an image. Shake off an image, perhaps, that Plymouth was a city that had kind of one foot in the past. So we can see a sort of contrast. So the Plymouth City, Spirit of Discovery, was very much celebrating the past, with albeit a nod to the future as well. But whereas Positively Plymouth was really emphasising the current, what was going on. Okay, and again, what it was trying to do with that image, the positively Plymouth image, was to try and celebrate positivity, celebrate diversity, celebrate innovation. And again, just on that picture there, you can see a picture of, in fact, the town centre designed by Patrick Abercrombie that arose from after the Second World War. It seemed sort of very innovative at the time. Also, pictures of the Roland Novinsky building, a very innovative building, part of the university, in fact. But as a marketing campaign, I don't think it really conveys much of a sort of sense of place. I don't think it has those sort of connections with heritage. Obviously, it alliterates the two plosive P's of positively Plymouth, but I don't think it has that really strong connection with a place, which was perhaps why in sort of 2013 it was actually sort of dropped as a brand. And it's been replaced by this current one. So this is Plymouth's current branding. It's called Plymouth, Britain's Ocean City. Okay, you can see there. And again, you can see the sort of signs that welcome you. I think it costs something like, according to the BBC, £85,000 for 5 signs to illustrate this going into Plymouth. And the sign you can see there, it's got Smeaton's Tower, which is a famous lighthouse, used to be out to sea on the Eddystone Rocks. That's sort of proudly on the Hoe, this green space in Plymouth overlooking the sea. So that's a sort of current marketing campaign, and I'll say a little bit about that in a moment. So it wasn't just a case of coming up with a swanky new sort of packaging and plastering the sort of city with various signs. There was a desire to sort of fit everything else into that image. And I'm going to show you some examples of that in a moment, about how various forms of marketing have aligned themselves to that marketing brand. Now, I'm hoping if I just escape from that and put that up, there we are. Hopefully, I can just okay, I'll leave that for now. Hopefully you can obviously follow the link and watch it if you'd like to. What a lovely place it is. But you can see just in that sort of brief clip, the images, the film, the activities going on align with this idea of an ocean city, that we are sort of facing the ocean. There is lots to do on the ocean or about the ocean. Okay, now in a sense this isn't new. So this is a fact a marketing card for the railways, Great Western Railway, prior to the war. In fact, you can see on the picture there a couple of sort of Sunderland flying boats, or Walrus flying boats, actually from an RAF base that's now, of course, turned into an area of leisure. You can see Smeaton's Tower in its old colours and so on. But again, you look at the other activities going on in Plymouth. We have the firework competition every August, which is spectacular. We've got MTV Crashes that's held on the Hoe. We've got a pirate festival. We've got all kinds of festivals that are aligned to the waterfront. Our very own graduation actually occurs up there. We have a splendid marquee on the Hoe. So we get the best of the Hoe and the best of the sort of sound following it as well. We can look at other forms of branding for the city. So this, for example, is Plymouth's 10K and half marathon that happens to run every year. And again, that's branded itself the Britain's Ocean City Half Marathon, not only in the pictures and the marketing, but also I'm very proud to show on the t-shirts you get at the end as well. I do it every year. And we've got various features that have been regenerated, such as the Royal William Yard. It used to be a Navy victualling yard. It's now a place full of offices, shops, cafes, and so on. We well, we still are, but we're not able to celebrate it quite as much as we wanted, celebrating the 400th anniversary of the Mayflower voyage of the Pilgrim Fathers sailing to America. And we were to have had all kinds of public events celebrating that. But again, this tie-in with the ocean city, spirit of discovery, and so on. We're the first place in the country to have a national marine park. It's kind of the equivalent of a national park that recognises the unique features of Plymouth Sound. So you can see it's not just a poster of Britain's ocean city. There's a whole load of activities designed to bring in visitors, bring in tourists that align with that idea of the ocean city. Again, you can question whether there are other ocean cities. It's quite clever because it's got the ocean city, so it's kind of claimed that for itself. And a friend of mine pointed out perhaps it's the only city that's on an ocean. Every other city, you know, we're on the Atlantic Ocean. Every other city's on a sea. I don't know. You can come back to me. So, you know, Liverpool's on the Irish Sea, Portsmouth's on the Channel. Anyway, probably come back to me, and others are on the North Sea, on the East Coast. Might come back to me and disagree with that, but that's sort of one theory about why it helps sort of stand out. And of course, our very own University of Plymouth. We also use that marketing. We not only sell the university, some of its marine strengths, but also the sort of fantastic environment that you can live and study in. Focus on the sound there. Plymouth Hoe, that's an area about means Saxon from high ground, overlooking the glorious Plymouth Sound in the background. So we use that in our marketing and iconography as well, to the extent that we locate the university very much in relation to the sea and the city. So again, if you'd like to know more, you know, do have a look at our virtual websites and open days. Marketing is also important in terms of redevelopment. So this is currently a plan in Plymouth to extend the sort of city centre through to a place called Mill Bay with all kinds of shops and, you know, nice environment, pleasant environment. And again, the idea of that is to bring the city closer to the sea, or the sea closer to the city, by linking it more directly with that environment. And again, you can see the same ideas of using the water, using the sea to remarket and rebadge a place. And it's also interesting to note that, of course, Mill Bay itself has got its own marketing. It calls itself Plymouth Coastal Quarter. It's trying to claim not only being part of Britain's ocean city, but perhaps being the closest bit to water. And again, I didn't realise there's another run I did that's actually sponsored by that. It's also got Mill Bay, Plymouth Ocean Quarter on the back of it. Of course, this sort of overall discourse of the ocean city perhaps highlights some features of the city and maybe neglects others. So Plymouth is like other places, got areas that's doing well, other areas less so. So recently in Plymouth, we've had Drake Circus Shopping Centre built. I can't remember the exact date, it's probably years ago now, 10 years ago, I think. Of course, Drake Circus, named after Drake, again, aligning to that theme. And that's attracted a whole load of multinational stores quite successfully. But at the other end of Plymouth, it's maybe gone into decline. So what that has done is remarket itself quite cleverly, I think, as the independent quarter, a place where you can go if you want local independent shops, a place where you can go if you want to get away from the clone town kind of thing. Not that Plymouth's a clone town, obviously, but the same old, you know, the Starbucks and the McDonald's and the you know, all those global brands. So it's marketed itself, I think, very cleverly as the independent quarter, a treasure trove, again, perhaps a nautical theme, of niche independent stores. And so it goes on. It's celebrating its independence and so on, in light of perhaps changes. I was also quite surprised to find that, in fact, where I live in Plymouth is a place called Peveril, and it's got a row of shops called Hyde Park. I didn't realise this, but apparently Hyde Park's a village. Didn't know that, but anyway, again, it's remarketing its shops there. In fact, it's a kebab shop there, as part of a village experience. Okay, so even within particular places, we get specific branding within those as well. Sometimes running with the theme, perhaps also trying to carve out a bit of a niche for itself. So that's the city. And again, we can probably all think of examples of why the city has rebranded itself, and you probably think of local examples near you. But I would also argue that rebranding is also important in rural places too. Just as the cities move from an industrial to post-industrial place, so too has the countryside moved from one that is based on farming to one that is based on consumption. Okay, the post-productive countryside, we call it. And probably, if anything, rebranding is maybe more important in the country than in the city. Because until the last 10, 20 years or so, the countryside had a bit of an image problem, seen as a little bit dull. It was seen as perhaps it lacked the sophistication of the city, it didn't have the shops, the nightlife, the sophistication, the international links. And so what there's been an attempt to do in some places is kind of trying to create what's called a hyper reality or hyper rurality, creating something that maybe never existed. Now, to explain this, I know my colleagues are looking forward to this bit. I'm going to use something incredibly highbrow. I'm going to show you a Peppa Pig video. Okay, now in this video, this is on YouTube, by the way. We don't own the copyright to this, so it's on YouTube, so it'll be publicly available. Peppa Pig and her family go and visit Potato City. I'll just play this and say something afterwards.
I'm Peppa Pig. This is my little brother George. This is Mummy Pig. And this is Daddy Pig. Peppa Pig. Potato City.
Peppa and her family are going to Potato City.
What is Potato City, Mummy?
It's a theme park, Peppa, where the magic of vegetables never ends.
It sounds a bit boring.
It will be fun. Potato City, here we come. Here we are.
The family have arrived at a field of potatoes.
Is this Potato City?
It must be. And it looks like we picked the right day to visit. There are no crowds.
Are you sure this is the right place, Daddy Pig? It just looks like a farmer's field to me.
Excuse me, is this Potato City?
No, that's Potato City.
It isn't quite what I was expecting.
It's fantastic.
How many tickets?
2 adults and 2 children, please, Miss Rabbit.
Busy, isn't it?
Busy? No. This is quiet for Potato City. Have a lovely day.
Peppa's friends have come to Potato City too.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Peppa.
And this is Mr. Potato himself. Welcome to Potato City, where the magic of vegetables never ends. See how vegetables grow, learn how they keep us fit and healthy, and get shot into space by the potato rocket. Peppa and her friends are going to ride on the potato rocket.
I'm sure we'd all like to see a lot more of that. But obviously the link's there if you want to. And just an apology to anyone who sort of arrived at this meeting while I was playing that and wondered what was going on with Peppa Pig. Anyway, it is a geography talk, don't worry. So there we are, there's a real Peppa Pig world. So what did that little video show? Well, it showed that the reality perhaps sometimes is a little bit dull. Who would pay money to go and see a field of potatoes? And so what they did in Potato City was turn that into what's called a hyper reality, an imagined form of the countryside, an imagined form of farming that obviously has never sort of really existed like that. But you're perfectly prepared to go and pay money to go and look at potatoes in a different context. There's no way on earth you pay money to look at potatoes in a field, but you would perhaps go and pay and look at potatoes as part of a theme park. And if you think that's sort of slightly exaggeration, oh God, who's actually going to pay money to go and look at potatoes? There's no such thing as a potato theme park. I'm not aware there is, there might be. There is Peppa Pig World. There's my family enjoying it. Oh, and someone drawing on it a couple of years ago. But actually, this is really clever. These are examples of 3 live sheep shows. So the one in the top left is the original one, a place called Rotorua in New Zealand. The one in the bottom left is the Lakeland Sheep and Wool Centre in Cockermouth. Sadly, that closed last year, I think. And the one at the bottom right is a place called Big Sheep, which is in North Devon. And actually, what you do is pay money to look at sheep. So I don't know where all those arrows are coming from. No idea where those arrows are coming from, doesn't matter. But if you want to see a sheep, there are thousands of sheep running around in the fields in the countryside. You can go and look at them for free if you want to. But what these entrepreneurs have done really cleverly is sort of repackage them so that people are willing to spend money to come and look at sheep, to look at what farmers do on an everyday basis, shearing sheep, rounding sheep up, feeding sheep. It's like if I could get people to pay to come and watch me giving a geography lecture, okay? Or if you're working in a factory, pay to watch people slipping bolts onto a car or what have you. It's a really clever piece of marketing that people are happy to pay for. And incidentally, this is a obviously, purely for research. When I was in New Zealand, we visited a farm park, and they had this sheep here with 5 legs, just a leg sticking out of it for some reason. No explanation, nothing. But anyway, made my day. And so what we've seen is rural places rebranding themselves to be part of this productive post-agricultural countryside. A really good example is in Warwickshire, in the Midlands. This is Hatton Country World. It used to be in the 1980s a mixed family farm with sheep, cattle and crops. It opened a farm park in 1991 and has added to it ever since. It's got a craft village, it's got rare breeds, it's got various sort of visitor attractors. And that picture of the silo for me sort of sums up the changes that have gone on in the post-productive countryside. Obviously, that used to be used for sort of storing grain and food and what have you. It's now the ticket office and souvenir shop. You can see the branding of quite a sort of pig there after the cafe. And that's what Hatton Country World looks like, okay? There's no sort of farming I can see as such. So yes, there are cows, there are crops and so on, but the family that run it now probably make most of their money, or the business that run it makes most of their money now from these other activities. Play sites, sheep racing tracks, American Gold Rush I can just see picking out, a whole load of indoor playthings, a craft village, swimming pool, nursery. They're not making money from producing things, as I said at the beginning. They're making money from people consuming things, buying goods, buying experiences, buying a day out in the countryside. And although the actual village has changes, and my favourite within it is just a guinea pig village, where you can see the South American animals in an old English village. Okay, I think the actual village has changed a little bit now. And so what this is something called commodification. So what entrepreneurs have had to do is turn something maybe rather mundane into something that is valuable, something that we want to buy into. Okay, it's a process called commodification. And in rural places, the whole idea of the countryside as perhaps being a place with fresh air, or providing a change of scene or a change of view, perhaps offering adventure or maybe tranquility, has been packaged and sold. And again, you can probably think of examples near you. Here's a few examples from around the world and around places that have shown how rural places have rebranded themselves. And interestingly, they play to all our senses. Obviously, sight's the obvious one, nice views and attractive scenery and so on. But also tranquility. So that middle slide of the cottage and the lake implies tranquility, peace and quiet. It plays to our senses. So some places have rebranded themselves as sort of food capitals. So an obvious one is Ludlow in Shropshire. We've had a lot of restaurants move out from London. It has an annual food festival. I'm sure you can probably think of other local food festivals near you as well. Near Plymouth, we've got the fantastic Langage Farm, which uses, very sort of sanitised pictures of cattle to sell the ice cream, making them anthropomorphic like people. So here's Mabel in that picture selling the ice cream. It also applies to our perhaps sense of touch. There's a picture of llama trekking in deepest Dorset a few years ago. And some places brand themselves on sound, like Tamworth in Australia has marked itself as a country music capital. And of course, you've only got to go to Glastonbury, again, sadly cancelled this year, which again will probably come back next time. So it's got a smiley face in the middle of it. So again, you can. There's Matt Bellamy again from down the road in Teignmouth, from Devon. Again, it's selling you not only the musical experience, but the experience of going to the countryside and getting out of the city, perhaps reconnecting with nature a little bit. So those are all examples of rural rebranding. I sort of couldn't really finish this talk without obviously mentioning the current situation. We're in this sort of rather bizarre situation now, where branding is telling people to stay away, at least for a little bit. So the top left one is, I think, from Cornwall. Come back later. Do visit us, but just not for a bit. Don't bring COVID with you. And again, Liverpool as well is saying, visit Liverpool later. Activities to do at home. It's actually marketing how you can look at Liverpool on the internet. So again, the current situation, I say it's almost some of this stuff I've talked about today is almost a history lesson rather than a geography one, but let's hope that activities sort of return to normal. But it's interesting to look at how places are rebranding themselves in the COVID crisis, having to react quite quickly. They don't want hordes of visitors, but equally they don't want to appear unfriendly either. So interesting things going on with that. Lots of pictures are going all over it. So just a sort of final thing, just to finish off. What I've taught today, I've shown you lots of pictures, hopefully sort of piqued your interest a little bit so you can go and look at some of these things. Places have had to rebrand themselves. They've had to do so as part of a larger strategy of changing economic circumstances. It's moved from production to consumption. And although I haven't gone into it in as much detail today, I'm quite happy to another time, you need to understand this as part of a wider regeneration strategy. What is it trying to do? Is it trying to invest in a particular area like Mill Bay in Plymouth or the canals in Birmingham? What have you. It's part of this wider regeneration strategy. Now, these views, as perhaps I've hinted at, are idealised. They're probably also the views of the powerful, government, tourist boards, industries that want you to invest in these areas. So in Plymouth, we've got the Ocean City thing, but also if you dig a little bit deeper, you also see other places rebranding themselves within the city in different ways, maybe following that brand, maybe going against it slightly. And the argument is this presents a very idealised view of a place. There's talk of what's called the Lake Woebegone. Okay, so woe be gone, all your troubles are gone. Where again, you look at these pictures, everybody's good looking, everybody's intelligent and successful and so on, and it presents an image of a place that is far from real. Okay. What's called, as I said before, a hyper-reality. It turns places, perhaps as that picture on the right shows, into something that's set up really just for the tourist gaze and maybe misses particular subtleties of it. And of course it does. I mean, you're not going to advertise a place and say it's full of problems. So of course, that's kind of partly common sense, isn't it? But more widely, you have to wonder whether people feel excluded if councils are paying thousands of pounds on marketing campaigns or statues or something like that, and not addressing perhaps the core issues that cause that restructuring or why that needs to come back in the first place. And obviously what it does is maybe, get us to look at a particular place in a particular way. And as geographers, perhaps we should be a little bit more critical, think about what's shown and what's not shown as well. Okay, so I hope you found that of interest. That's about all I've got to say. I've gone slightly over my 40 minutes, sorry about that. Hope you're still there. Just put that one up. Sorry, I just shut that down a bit prematurely. Yeah, just put that up again. If you're interested in this, we do offer all kinds of courses looking at geography, geology, sciences, my own areas in geography, do human, physical, various combinations of joint honours as well. In normal times, we get out, we do a lot of field work, we go and explore some of these issues, and hopefully it won't be too long before we can do that again. But again, if you're interested in any of that, please come and visit us, if only virtually for the moment. I've put some links up on that screen. We've got sort of online open days. They've got information about the university, about courses. You click on the link there, you can find out a little bit more about geography at Plymouth, and also look at our celebrations. We're in fact 50 years old last year, so one of the perhaps oldest, more established departments in the country. And also partly linked, I mean, it's kind of a practical, go and do this, go and look at our website as a follow-up activity. We've kind of gone virtual. We're showing off Plymouth on our campus, and indeed Britain's Ocean City, virtually online as well. So you can have a look at that, either out of interest or even perhaps as a follow-up exercise, thinking about marketing and branding as part of this talk as well. So that is all I've got to say and do. I'll just get rid of Pepper and Friends. Hopefully, I'll stop share. That'll do it. So hopefully you can sort of see me back. Right. Thank you for listening. I don't know, Shane, have we had any questions? I've just
Yeah, there's been a few come in, Richard.
Okay, I need to find them. Sorry. Are they all on the chat, or are they on that document?
They're on the Word document.
Okay, I'll just bear in a moment. I'll look now. Anyway, I hope that all. Could you see all the film and everything? Is that all okay?
Yeah.
Right, hang on. Sorry, I just need to open up another document where we've been having some of the questions that have come in. You're also welcome to contact me, of course. Richard Yarwood, ryarwood at plymouth.ac.uk. Hopefully you can't see the screen now, can you?
No.
Okay, so I'll just go through some of the questions, so see which ones I can answer. I've got one from Lucy. Can we have copies of the PowerPoint? Yes, we can make that available, I think, for you to look at. Will said, what's the difference between rebranding, marketing, and reimagining? In this case, probably not much. I think I've used them fairly interchangeably. I'm sure if you delved into it, you could look at precise definitions of things. But a lot of geographers are interested in images of places, the way that places look, the way that they present themselves to it. So think of a place, if I just run through some places, London, Birmingham, New York, and so on. You've probably got an image of that Snowdon. You've probably got an image of that place in your mind. And that's come from all sorts of different sources, whether it's media, whether it's TV programs, whether it's you perhaps visited there on holiday, perhaps you've had a good experience, a bad experience there. Some places have just got an image that keeps being reproduced all the time. So what rebranding does is to try and change that image. It's a re-imaging of a place. So the classic ones I've perhaps touched on a bit today is, Birmingham, it's seen as an industrial city, connected with all kinds of heavy industry, maybe pollution and so on as well. That has re-imaged itself as a conference centre, a vibrant sort of cosmopolitan place. So sometimes you've got these images, some good, some bad. And what re-imaging, rebranding does is play on the good bits, play on the heritage, and try to play down some of the bad stuff. So hopefully that answers it. Images is the idea about the place we have. Sometimes it's called socially constructed or culturally constructed. And what rebranding and marketing does is try and change those sort of images of places. Zach asks, is it easy to determine how places change through quantitative or qualitative methods? Really good question, Zach. Sorry, I sound like the government ministers now on a briefing. That's a great question. Hopefully not too patronising as I are. Anyway, so quantitative analysis, as hopefully you're aware, is looking at numbers and data. Qualitative information is the kind of softer data that it's very hard to sort of quantify and put numbers on. And I think probably the best way of looking, as I have done today perhaps, is looking at some of the qualitative things. So there's all kinds of visual methods you could use where you can what's called deconstruct the images that are put up, and what's called looking at the icons or the iconography. And you can look at the meaning that's attached to those particular things. So if we put a picture up, for example, of Hong Kong, of the ferry, well, what does that mean? Well, actually, it's got a lot of, it's unique, it's got a lot of local support, and it's a kind of local feature. So that's kind of what it means. Or if you put a picture up of a bull in the bull ring, what does that mean? And so on. So that's a really good way of doing it. There's other ways I could talk of how you do that. At the same time, what I haven't done so much today, and I think what is important, is to look at this as part of a broader change in the economy, in how places change. And as I said before, rebranding and remarketing are often campaigns linked to trying to get places to change, attract investment, move away from one industry and towards another one. And therefore, to look at how places have changed like that, quantitative things are really good. So I put some data up at the beginning about relative employment strengths in particular places. It would be also good to look at, actually, if you've run a campaign, and again, I haven't done this today, sorry, if you've run a campaign, what's the impact on that place? To what extent has the economy changed? To what extent has it been successful? Has spending gone up or down? Is it in recession, or is it or is it improving? And quantitative data will help you to do that. Okay, so I think my answer to that question is both, but they've both got those specific reasons and purposes. I hope that answers it, Zach. Matt, what kind of questions do I give them for my exams? How do I go about answering it? I don't want to commit to that one. I don't work for an A-level board, and I don't want to sort of preempt anything they're doing. Obviously, the main advice is go and have a look at some past papers and talk to your teachers about sort of techniques of answering those. John, has rebranding changed as the world become more globalized? Well, I think it's become more necessary. And I think the stages that places are operating on have got bigger. So you've got a lot of places rebranding themselves, not just within a particular place, but for global marketplace. Okay, so again, we talk about global cities, don't we? The really big sort of global cities, especially like New York and London and Milan and all these kind of places, Paris. And they're competing against each other. There's various indices that sort of show what's the best one for cultural experience or politically and so on. So yes, they are, I think, competing on the global marketplace. The interesting thing as well is that the way that rebranding is done, I think, is trying to run counter to globalization. Yes, they're trying to get global markets, but what they're trying to emphasize is their uniqueness and some of their local features. So yes, it's changed in that there are wider places to compete with, but at the same time, as the world's got bigger, I think the emphasis on the local and local uniqueness has got more important. Lucy, colourful rebranding help? Actually, unless there's restructuring investment. Yeah, so Lucy, that's a good question. To what extent does rebranding help unless there's restructuring investment? The two go hand in hand, certainly they do. There's obviously no point re-imaging a place if there's nothing to sort of sell. So yeah, the two go hand in hand. And although I didn't do this so much today, it's really useful, I think, if you're looking at your changing places. I think you look at your home place and another more distant place, to look at how the two go together. Okay, so yeah, what I did today, because it's a bit of a distance lecture, was keep that sort of fairly light, I guess. But again, there's other talks I've done where I've looked at places like Mill Bay and so on. Okay, possibly investigators coursework, finding it interesting, hard to research. Okay, Rishi, hopefully the talk's given you a few ideas and ways forward. Look at some websites, see what campaigns are up there, see where you can contact perhaps local authorities. Over time, governments have put more and more sort of money into rebranding as well. So that would be sort of one way forward. Have a look at some websites initially. Look at, as I did with Plymouth, see how it's sort of changed over the years a little bit as well. See if you can talk to, probably virtually these days, particularly local authorities. Particularly local authorities. They are still the drivers, if you like, the coordinators of particular places and areas. Okay, so that might be a sort of good place to start. Ben, can you see high priority being more common? How are locations rebrand to deal with this whilst they're having an income of tourists and visitors? Really good questions. I guess with the sort of hyper reality, I guess you're meaning the kind of online stuff that we're all living our lives in these days. I'm guessing that's what you mean. So that's a really good question, and it's a really good time to look at it originally, because the sort of COVID thing at the moment is unique. I've sort of never had anything like it in my lifetime. And the really sort of clever thing is that a lot of places, whether they're cities, whether they're universities, whether they're museums, whether they're sort of singers, entertainers with concerts and so on, are now using the internet to kind of replace the experience of going there. My guess is, and my hope is, that this is temporary. That this is a way of keeping up interest, of trying to keep up an income stream. Where you can't get physical visitors. And what I'm hoping is that obviously when this lifts and can go and visit places again, we're going to be back to the old ways of trying to get people to visit physically. On saying that, everything is changing, and it may well be that actually some of the virtual stuff that you mentioned there may work alongside or perhaps replace some things as well. But it's going to be really interesting to see how this pans out, Ben, and watch this space. Sophie, again, one to do with the coronavirus, positive or negative effects on cities, branding or regeneration. I think we've got to be really careful, if I'm being honest. I showed you a couple of slides at the end that sort of said, come back later and come and visit us, not just for, you've got this thing. And I think it's been really interesting. We're sort of following this on the news in the way that places, particularly sort of rural places, coastal places, are trying to keep visitors away, which is counter to everything that they normally do. And the danger in that is if it comes across perhaps as unfriendly, or it comes across as not wanting visitors. Now, I should emphasise this isn't the case. They're quite right in trying to keep transmission rates down and stop the virus spreading and so on. And so the theme that's sort of adopted is this sort of come back later. We'd love you to visit, we'd love you to come here, just not for a bit. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how it pans out with that. But certainly that's the message at the moment, is that we want you, we'd like you to visit, we're still here, it's still important, just not for a bit. And again, it's a careful balancing act, I think, to try and achieve, to keep your perhaps local population safe. And remember, a lot of rural places have got very limited services, doctors and so on, so it's entirely understandable. Keep those safe, but at the same time, keep that interest, keeping that openness, keep that friendliness going. So again, you're looking for maybe sort of project ideas and things to look at. To keep yourself a file, keep some web links, cut and paste some things out about how that's going, and look at how these discourses sort of change. It'd be a really original thing to do, and so on. Abby, how much do cities, counties rely on government grants for regeneration? It's been done for internal funds and from a really good question. Over the years, local governments, so your city council, your county council, and so on, have been spending perhaps more and more money on rebranding. If you look at a book called Urban Geography by Tim Hall and Heather Barrett, they've got a really good chapter on branding. And they sort of said in the 1980s, a fraction of income, a fraction of city council budgets was spent on rebranding. Very few cities even had a sort of leaflet describing them. And over time, more and more of that has gone into it. So high proportions of the budget are spent on that. They tend to do it in partnership. So they will perhaps contract work to, obviously, PR companies and marketing companies, specialist companies, to do that as well. There's always debates, if you look at, I was going to show it, I didn't today, and it should be shown again soon, I think, the 2012 clip of the London Olympic opening ceremony and the London Olympics, the sort of thousands of millions that was spent on that. And also in your local town, you can probably think of events where some people think, yeah, it's brilliant, and other people think it's taxpayers' money, it's a waste. We've just had a big statue of a kind of skater-looking person put outside in Plymouth. Again, it creates distinctiveness. But the counter to that is, well, couldn't that money be spent on jobs? Couldn't it be spent on cleaning the city or other things like that? And of course, the idea of this is that by speculating, okay, you hopefully invest, you accumulate, you speculate to accumulate. So in spending money on regeneration, on spending money on these things that sometimes seen as frivolous, the idea is it will draw income into the city and will benefit it. There is kind of a critical literature on this that says, okay, well, the kind of jobs that are being created are kind of jobs, perhaps sort of poorly paid service sector, 0 hours contract jobs. So I showed you various theme parks. A lot of people working in theme parks are on 0 contract hours, for example, probably suffering at the moment. So it's a huge debate about that. There is a kind of critical literature on the amount that's being spent, the fact that cities are now competing with each other as entities as well. But probably the best starting point, have a look at the book Urban Geography by Tim Hall, Heather Barrett. Be a really good sort of starting point. Tom, zoos acquire other attractions be considered a hyper-reality? Again, a really good question about that. Again, there's a whole literature on zoos as to the kind of environments to try and create. Are they just sort of entertainment spaces? Are they conservation spaces as well? And certainly things like aquariums and so on are really important within it. Obviously, they don't try and reproduce what they do try and reproduce sort of natural conditions in a way, but I think zoos are often, there's a sort of degree of honesty with them. So they tell you about the environments, they tell you about what's trying to recreate in that particular place as well. But certainly those kind of big attractions, we've got the National Marine Aquarium in Plymouth, for example, are a key part of branding and marketing. So, it's something that sort of a key flagship thing that might draw visitors in. So in Plymouth, as I say, we've got the National Marine Aquarium. People go and visit that. They might go and spend money in a cafe or go and have a stroll around the front and buy an ice cream. So that's important. What do you consider the most important phase of branding in order to be effective? I think probably that's from Teddy. Thank you. Probably that enrolling people into it. You need to come up with a strong brand. And again, if you look back through the slides, there's some examples about what constitutes a strong brand. But the really effective ones have got people that are buying into that align things together, that you go to a place and you've got that strong message, not just from seeing a poster, but also from seeing things going on around you, whether it's a marine festival or whether it's an ocean festival or something like that, that buys into it, okay, and it generates income as well, perhaps relating to that second question. So I think, and you can probably think of places. Think about, let's move away from places. Think about, I don't know, your favourite drink or sweets or chocolates or something. There's always been cases where your favourite brand of chocolate or crisp or something have tried a new recipe or have renamed itself. And sometimes it's for the best, other times it isn't. People want the old version of it. And I can think of certain recipes, not going to mention any brands, certain recipes that tried that and had to go back to the old one. You probably, if you get a chocolate bar with peanuts in, call it a Snickers. Well, in the old days, that was a marathon, so that's an example of successful branding. Anyway, sorry, I'm diverting. But in the same way that food products have had successes and had failures, so too has place marketing as well. And I think it's the activities around it, that participant pays, that get people to buy into it. Obviously, having a strong brand that you can identify with is important, but it's those other activities that actually generate the income and generate things going forward as well. See how we're doing. I think it's just one more from Robin. Other examples where rural rebranding have tried to address a lack of engagement from the BME community. Have they squared that with traditional heritage perception? Again, that's a really, really good question. And what I'd perhaps encourage you to do is have a look at, there was a landscapes review, can't remember the exact name, but it came out last year, that was looking at national parks, areas of outstanding natural beauty. And again, there's some work by a photographer, it's a few years on there, by someone called Ingrid Pollard, who was a black photographer who took pictures of herself in places like the Lake District to draw attention to the way that she sometimes felt out of place in these places, that there were very few other black faces there. And so what the landscape report has done recently is suggest ways in which we can widen engagement with the countryside and national parks. For example, specific efforts to perhaps get people out from cities who wouldn't normally go to these places, and to encourage it. So that's one particular thing. It's called the Landscapes Review by Glover. It was out last year as well. Just something else to pick up on that theme is that actually things like ethnicity and have actually been used to sell places and products. So near us, there's a guy called Wilfred Emmanuel Jones. He's a farmer, and he sells a range of sausages called the Black Farmer Sausage. And he argues he's the only black farmer in Britain, and he's actually a businessman. He's from a marketing background. He uses the idea of what's called jeopardy, something that's sort of slightly edgy. Okay, let's call these sausages Black Farmer Sausages. Let's play on to a race to sell them. So he's actually used his ethnicity to actually very successfully market a brand of produce that at once goes with and against perhaps traditional perceptions of rural heritage. But actually, Robin, that is a really, really good question. And yeah, there's been critiques that very often the branding in rural places in particular fits into an image of heritage, and very often that is a white heritage. But some of the things I've mentioned, the Glover reports, photography by Ingrid Pollard, the Black Farmer Sausage range, are things that kind of try and play against that and try and diversify the countryside and rural experiences there. But that's a really good question. Rebranding in Plymouth been particularly successful. Divide between affluent areas and poor areas more prominent. Again, a really good question. Have a look at, it was an equality report, it was called Fairness Commission. That's it, Plymouth Fairness Commission. And sadly what that showed is, in fact, there's something like a 12-year difference in life expectancy between the richest part of Plymouth and some of the poorest parts. And no amount of rebranding is necessarily going to change that. What you've also had in particular places, and very often rebranding is focused on areas of the city that perhaps have suffered economically. So I'm thinking places like the Docklands in London, perhaps near the docks in sort of Liverpool as well. Same Plymouth, it's some of the areas around sort of Devonport and the docks. And very often these things are focused on areas that need regenerating. Now, the argument is that very often the way this has been done is to focus on what's called a flagship project. So Canary Wharf in London, for example, okay, that was seen as a sort of flagship. And the argument is that the jobs that are created in these places haven't necessarily replaced some of the skilled jobs, some of the more permanent jobs that have gone on in, perhaps an industrial base that we had in the past. So the argument is that the jobs they're creating are kind of muck jobs. They're not really generating the wealth. Or the idea is that some of these things benefit. So you look at London Docklands, for example, it's a classic example of, it was done in the 1980s, 1990s. You had Canary Wharf, Canada Square, the big new financial centre set up there. You had the newspapers move out there as well. But you also had a lot of opposition from local people, okay, who weren't necessarily seeing the benefits of that. What it can also do, all this reinvestment and regeneration, rebranding, it makes places seem more pleasant. That's the whole point of it. And what this can lead to in urban and rural places is what's called gentrification, where perhaps the original, often poor residents are perhaps bought out by new groups of people moving in. So if you look at a place that's got swanky flats, okay, look at the prices of them compared to the average wages in the area, okay, and think to what extent can local people buy into that and that branding. And you sometimes see, and this was the case in London Docklands, there's a whole marketing campaign based around the Docklands that was subverted, transgressed, and there's sort of alternative posters coming out that were actually advertising, also actually drawing attention to things like the exclusionary nature of the investment there, okay, that local people couldn't buy houses. Local people, if you've got an artisan baker or something, that's lovely if you can afford it, but, there are food deserts and places where people simply can't afford that. So again, have a look at some of these classic examples. So London Docklands are a really good one, where perhaps you've got exaggerated divides. Also, when you're doing that, look at security. You get kind of these bubbles, these new investment places with CCTV and private guards, and look what goes on outside it as well. So as I say, there is a critical literature on whether rebranding and regeneration, particularly by public-private partnerships and private partnerships, is benefiting a wider population. And again, a good starting point if you want a good urban textbook that introduces these issues is the Urban Geography book by Tim Hall and Heather Barrett. Okay, so I think that's all the questions. I don't know if anybody's still there. If you are, thank you for listening. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've got something out of it. The only thing I would say is obviously good luck to you all in these sort of strange times. Stay well, stay safe. If you're studying for your A-levels, keep going, keep at it. I know it's sort of difficult, and above all, sort of good luck with your studies. And we'll come out of this, and when we do, hopefully we can return to doing some proper field work and some proper talks as well. But in the meantime, so I've been Richard Yarwood, University of Plymouth. Thanks very much for listening, and I hope you found it relevant to your courses. Thank you.